So over on the NA version of the game, we have this weird winter campaign going on. I covered that in yesterday's video, and they're bringing a special raid up that has both Arthur and Ozymandias going up on raid up. So let's go ahead and talk about these two chads and if they're worth summoning for or not. Obviously, you guys kind of know my brief thoughts if you watched yesterday's video, but I'm going to go a little bit more in depth with the usual servant video in this video, and we're going to talk about Arthur. And if you enjoy daily FGO content, because that's what your boy does, make sure you toss him that like and that subscribe. He's on the road to 100k, and every little bit of support will help out. If you want to see more videos, I go live on Twitch every weekday. You can go to my Twitch and then click the schedule little tab over there, and that should kind of show you in your time zone generally when I stream on certain days. Although that might change because winter break is coming up for me, so once winter break hits, I'll probably be streaming a little bit earlier, or maybe a little later. I'm not really sure yet. Finally, if you want to go that extra mile showing your support for the channel, you can click that join button to become a channel member and gain access to some new content that I'm going to be uploading for members here in a bit whenever I get to the challenge quest in the Guda 5 event. That's probably what I'm going to be uploading, just like challenge quest videos, maybe some exclusive summoning videos. And then when we get enough members, I want to do like exclusive servant videos for the channel members. But if you're interested in that, the join button is right there. But with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the subject of today's video. Let's talk about Arthur, who I might have been a little too hard on in yesterday's video, because I don't actually think Arthur's all that bad, and I don't know if that was conveyed in the video. I don't know if those true thoughts came across in that way. It might have just sounded like I was just ragging on Arthur the entire time, when in all reality, he's fine. Like, he's an average, just like decent gold saber. He's definitely not bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's just, he kind of gets overshadowed by the other Buster AoE sabers. In particular, people seem to prefer to use Artoria and Mordred more than they prefer to use Arthur. The main reason is probably the difference in their battery, because Mordred and Artoria both have a 30% battery, whereas Arthur over here only has a 20% battery. And then you have Artoria, who just does way more consistent damage than both Mordred and Arthur. She doesn't need any special damage mods. She just always does big ooga booga damage. And then when it comes to Mordred and Arthur, I think Arthur has a better special damage mod against super large enemies, but as time goes on, it seems people prefer Mordred's crit skill more than Arthur's, because hers is definitely more targeted and a bit better, because it actually comes with the star weight and the specific Buster crit damage. So it just leaves Arthur in third place, and it kind of leaves him feeling a little lackluster in comparison to the other two, but he's definitely not bad, and we'll talk about that in today's video. So starting off with Arthur's hits, you can definitely tell that he's a bit of an older servant here, because his hits are all quite low. 3 hits on the one quick card with 10% star gen. Please, for the love of God, do not go clicking this quick card. I don't know what you think you're doing by clicking the quick card, but you're not going to accomplish jack diddly squat. Now, if you want to click those 2 art cards that have 2 hits each and 0.84% NP gen, then that's a bit of a respectable move, because as long as you're getting crits on these arts cards, you will be refunding a massive amount of your NP back, because unfortunately, even though his NP gain is rather high because the hits are so low, he's going to be heavily dependent on getting crits on those arts cards. We do like to see that he at least has the 5-hit extra attack. If you didn't know, if you're unaware for whatever reason, let me educate you. The extra attack is a composite card that gens stars, NP, and does big boy damage. Having a high hit extra attack can really make those Brave Chains just hit different, which is very good for a DPS servant like Arthur. Now, the extra attack has one weakness: it cannot crit, so it's very reliant on your base NP gen and your base star gen being very, very high, so don't expect to be genning a lot of stars with this, but this actually will help him out a little bit when it comes to NP genning, which, as I said earlier, because he only has a 20% battery, he is going to need just a little bit of help doing that NP genning. But overall, the main takeaway is make sure you get crits on those arts cards when you can, and his extra attack is actually pretty good. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and start moving into his skills. Now, skill 1 right now is just a Buster Mana Burst, which is just a 50% buff to his Buster cards for 1 turn on a 5-turn cooldown, which is rather good. It means for that turn, especially if you can get a Buster Brave Chain, Arthur is going to look super impressive, because he's essentially getting a Buster steroid for that turn. However, he does get a buff in the future that makes this significantly better. Now, longtime viewers know that I'll go on about how there's a difference in the way that DW does certain types of buffs. So, for instance, for these card buffs, you either get a mana burst that only lasts for 1 turn, and it's really big, or you generally get like a 30% buff that's smaller, but it lasts for 3 turns. And that's generally the two ways that they try to buff somebody's card types. But for Arthur, I think they just sensed that he definitely needed a lot of help. So when they buff his first skill, it turns into a 3-turn Buster Mana Burst. That's right, 3 turns of 50% Buster damage for free, no restrictions on it whatsoever. And if that already wasn't enough, they tacked on a 30% NP generation buff that also lasts for 3 turns, because as I was saying, Arthur needs a little bit of help when it comes to NP genning, and this makes it just that much more easier, and it makes those arts crits that much more efficient when he does get them. So if you are somebody that's pulling for Arthur because you really like Arthur, which understandable, if you've like seen Fate Prototype, or not like seen, but you know, read the little fragments of Prototype that we do have, Arthur's pretty dope, so I can understand people summoning for Arthur just because he's cool, or if you already have Arthur, because you're like me, and you were trying to get Waver on one of the Chaldea Boys raid-ups, and you actually walked away with Arthur, then you can at least look forward to this skill 1 getting buffed in the future, because this will make him significantly better, and it fixes the only issue that mana bursts have, and that they're only 1 turn, so it actually makes him a very high damaging unit, or a relatively high damaging unit that is also very consistent as well. Then moving on to his second skill, if you have not buffed this skill, I have no idea what you're doing. It originally just drops 15 stars, but then DW was like, let's buff that up to 30 stars, which significantly, again, helps him get those arts crits and look impressive with Buster crits, because he also gets a 50% crit damage buff that lasts for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. If you guys don't know, 50% is the same crit buff that Waver gives. I always bring him up because I feel like that's a crit damage buff that everybody knows about, and everybody's probably used Waver, so when you break them, oh, it's the same one that Waver gives, people are like, oh, that's actually pretty good, 50% for 3 turns, that's really strong. And so with skill 1 and skill 2, you have a very solid DPS servant forming, and then with the third skill, you kind of tie it all together, because he's getting a 100% damage buff against super large enemies for 1 turn, and he's getting a 20% battery, again on a 5-turn cooldown. Honestly, I think this could be the next thing that they buff on Arthur. Just make the super large damage buff last for 3 turns, and then maybe bump that 20% battery up to 30 or even 40%. And then we'll have a very, very strong DPS servant on our hands. I'm also kind of hoping that maybe they just throw like an invincibility on that third skill, or a guts. Honestly, I think the guts will be better with the style of gameplay that Arthur wants to have. And that way it doesn't feel like you're wasting the invincibility if they do put that on the third skill. Because at least guts tend to last for a few turns, so you can pop it and not have to worry about wasting it. Because that's really the only thing that Arthur's lacking. While he does have a lot of skills that do make him do some pretty decent damage, and they do make him pretty consistent, he really has no way to keep himself alive. And you'll notice that this is a very common pattern with Buster servants that were released around the time of Merlin, because Merlin is such a good defensive support type servant that they didn't feel like they really needed to give a lot of these Buster servants their own method of survivability, or really make them lean into it all that much, because Merlin does that job so well with his AoE invincibility and the ability to spam heal people with double Merlin. So that's really the only weakness that Arthur has. But moving into current meta, with how hard some of the boss fights can get and how aggressive they can be, you definitely want your main DPS servant to also have their own method of survivability just in case. So just give him a guts that maybe lasts for 3 or even 5 turns. I think that would be super nutty broken, but just give it to him because Arthur really needs it. Make the super large buff last 3 turns, and then give him like a 30 or 40% battery, and I think he's going to be super sick. At least bump it up to 30% so he's on the same level as Artoria and Mordred, and I'll be all good. He also does probably need a buff to his NP, because his NP is super basic. It's just a giant beat stick. Even the overcharge effect buffs the NP damage by 10 to 50%. Thankfully, it procs first. And considering the direction that the Buster meta is going with characters like Himiko and Morgan being in the game, it's not too unfeasible for you to get him up to like Overcharge 3, which means he could be doing significantly better damage if you can get him that 30% NP damage buff, combined with basically having a 50% mana burst up 3 turns out of 5. He'll definitely be doing pretty good consistent damage, but like I'm saying, I really want to see him get some method of survivability, and then just bring up those 2 buffs on his third skill to kind of make him more modern and make it more consistent with his deck. And then after that, I think Arthur's going to be a really solid servant. Which, believe you me, I want Arthur to be good. I like Arthur a lot, and I have Arthur on NA, so I would like him to be really good. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What do you guys think about Arthur? Do you guys think he's a super solid servant and maybe I'm not giving him enough credit, or do you think he's being rated pretty properly? Again, I think he's pretty comfortably being rated in this video. I think I'm being pretty fair to him. But I always know there's going to be those people saying, "Oh man, ZTL, you're just capping." So bring on the cap comments, bring them on. I'll listen to them. I'll go down there and I'll read them. Someone's going to tell me that, "Oh yeah, well I soloed all of Lost Belt 6 with Arthur, so I think he's the best servant in the game." And I'm like, you know what, buddy? If it took all of your blue cubes to do that, to get Arthur to solo Serranos, then pop off, buddy. More power to you. But with that being said, guys, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace, late, guys.